Welcome to LifeBridge Online. Please take a moment to share this video with your family and friends. And if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button so that you can stay connected with us. Join us now as we worship in song.
Come set your rule and reign in our hearts again. Increase in us, we pray. Unveil why we're made. Come set our hearts ablaze with hope like wildfire in our very souls. Holy Spirit, come invade us now. We are your church. We need your power in us. We seek the kingdom first. We hunger and we thirst. We dare to waste our lives for our joy and prize. To see the captives' hearts released, the hurt, the sick, the poor at peace. We lay down our lives for heaven's cause. We are your church. We pray, revive this earth. Oh, build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and men. Set your church on fire. Lift this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Unleash your kingdom's power. Reaching the near and far. No force of hell can stop your blue changing hearts. You made us for much more than this. Awake the kingdom seed in us. Fill us with the strength and love of Christ. We are your church. We are the hope on earth. Oh, build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray. Oh, build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and men. Set your church on fire. Bring this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray.
Worthy of every praise.
the only one who could ever sing. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you.
Hey, good morning, church. We're glad to have you here with us. Do you realize, Pastor Tom, if it wasn't leap year, what today would be? May the 4th. That's tomorrow.
May the 4th be with
We
you.
would have Star Wars Day on here on Sunday if otherwise. Leap year. We're just glad that you guys came with us this morning. We just want to remind you again of our weekly schedule. We're doing things with our question of the week on Mondays. It was kind of neat seeing some of the passages everybody said that they liked. That was a good interaction. We're going to do something different tomorrow. You'll just have to wait till tomorrow to see what question I put up there. And then Tuesday, our prayer requests. So send in your prayer requests so we can pray with and for you guys. Wednesday, meeting together with our Zoom calls and the Facebook Live for Pastor Tom's Bible study through Psalms. And then Thursday, the Zoom calls. How'd that go this week? The Zoom calls went well.
Went real well.
Great.
We had a great time talking through Psalm 91 and then praying at the end of our time together. It was really good.
Good. Then we're doing the Fasting Friday, fast one meal on Friday just to focus on God during the day, and then food distribution that evening. So we're going to go and get into our little Bible study for the day as we're reading through Exodus and the end of Genesis, the beginning of Exodus.
Yes, we are going to talk about a dreamer today, Joseph. This guy had an amazing life. And to you teenagers out there, when we start this story today, he is 17 years old. So Evan, I think Evan and Audrey are close to that age.
Audrey is 17. Evan will be in August.
Yeah, so you guys that are 16, 17, this Joseph starts out as a dreamer. We hear the story that he is a favorite of his father Jacob. That is because he was from, his mom was Rachel. So we have Rachel and Leah, and each of them have a handmaiden, and these 4 women have given Jacob 12 sons. But Rachel was the favorite. Remember, Rachel and Leah were sisters, but Rachel was the favorite, and so Joseph and Benjamin are her sons, and so Jacob keeps Joseph in high esteem, and so he gives him a coat of many colors. And the other brothers, there is jealousy going on here.
Jealousy? No, jealousy with brothers? No, never. I don't have 2 brothers who are never jealous of each other. No.
So, we had this with Jacob and Esau. There was enmity between the brothers there, but thankfully they later on in life they were able to rectify things and get back together. And we see with these 12 brothers, there's a lot of enmity, animosity, arguing going on, all this kind of stuff. And we're first introduced to Joseph when he is sent out to his 10 brothers, his 10 older brothers. Benjamin's the youngest, and they're herding sheep, flocks of cows and other animals. And he goes out to find them, and he tells them a dream, I guess in this time, where he says that there's some sheaves in the field, and all your sheaves bow down to me. That's pretty brazen.
That is. Even
if you had that dream, would you tell somebody?
Or even later when he has a dream and he's telling his mom and dad the dream he has, that the sun and the moon and the stars are bowing down to him. I mean, that takes some guts.
But Jacob, for what it's worth, he hides these things in his heart. He doesn't respond violently to his son. But now the brothers, they have a different plan. And when he gets out to the brothers and is talking to them, they say, "Hey, look, this dreamer comes. Why don't we kill him?" They're just not holding back here.
No, not at all.
But Reuben sticks up.
The oldest brother.
Older brother. He sticks up for. He says, "No, let's not shed his blood." And so they throw him in a pit. Like, that's much better. But and then Judah gets the idea, hey, let's make some money off of this, so let's sell him. And they sell him to a caravan of Ishmaelites coming by, and he gets taken into Egypt, into Potiphar's house. And here starts in chapter 39 of Genesis just a saga of an amazing life. But yet God is with him. That's the cool part about all this. Joseph probably didn't feel very blessed at this point, having just been thrown in a pit, sold, and now part of Potiphar's house. But it says in verse 2 through 5 of Genesis 39, the Lord was with Joseph, and his master saw that the Lord was with Joseph, and he succeeded in all he did, and the Lord blessed his house. And then in verses 21 and 23, when he gets thrown into prison, we'll get to that in a minute, but it says the Lord was with Joseph and gave him favor in prison, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. We talked about this yesterday, Pastor Dave, in our Zoom calls with Psalm 91. There are some circumstances that we experience in life that God takes us through instead of keeping us from and sheltering us. Some things He protects us from, keeps us from. The other things, He goes with us through them. And this is one of these situations here in Potiphar's house where you have his wife. What a situation this would be. You have this guy's wife. He has noticed that the favor of the Lord is on you. Everything you do succeeds in his house. You basically have the reign of the house. And yet his wife, while he's away, is trying to seduce him. And then on top of that, she plots, after trying to get him into bed with him, she plots and lies on him and gets him thrown into prison. But yet, listen to what this says. It says, God gave him favor in prison. So God's with him through all this.
We even talked about this Wednesday night with our students Zoom call. That's something that happened years ago when I was at Calvary. Just something just basic. I just called it that God's got a plan when we don't understand. And how kind of the story of Joseph is so appropriate for right now, because he was taken away from his normal life, thrown through an exile, basically through quarantine.
At 17,
he's in prison. He's a slave. He's sold to another person. Then he gets thrown into jail. I mean, talk about a shakeup of his life. Just like we've just went through a shakeup of our lives with this.
Oh yeah.
This whole pandemic on us. So it's kind of, his story kind of just shows that God's still with us, and he still has that plan, even though we don't know what's going on. He's putting stuff in order for later on.
Yeah, and I think this is a good lesson for us. No matter what we put our hands to, no matter where our feet go, no matter what comes our way, bad, good, indifferent, we need to understand that God is with us, number one, and two, we can find success in ways that maybe the world doesn't see as successful. But as long as God's favor is with us, like Jacob or Joseph was here in Potiphar's house in basically slavery, although he did get the favor of God on him, but then he's in prison, and it still says that God's favor is with him. So we can learn from this and understanding that our circumstances do not determine God's favor. Isn't that a cool thing?
Oh, yeah.
That should be liberating to us, is that when we are in right standing with God, his favor is regardless of situations in our life. And so we have to kind of segment and separate our lives in that regard. Well, while he's in prison, two other guys have bad luck as well. The cupbearer and the baker from Pharaoh's household are thrown into jail. And each of these guys have dreams. Here we are back to the dreams again. And they tell their dreams to Joseph. And Joseph says to the cupbearer about these three branches that bud. And he takes the fruit and makes a drink, wine basically, for the Pharaoh, and gives Pharaoh the cup. And Joseph says favorably, Pharaoh is going to lift your head in 3 days for the three branches, and you're going to be restored to your position as cupbearer. And the baker says, oh man, that's a good report. Why don't you tell me my dream? It's similar. And he tells the story of 3 cake baskets where these birds are eating from the cake baskets. And Joseph, this is funny as we read it, but it's not funny for the baker to experience this. But he says, Pharaoh's going to lift your head as well.
Literally.
From your body. Not what you wanted to hear. He's hoping to hear favorable story like the cupbearer got. He says, Pharaoh's going to hang you. And in 3 days, the cupbearer is restored. The baker is hanged. But there's a problem here. The cupbearer was supposed to remember Joseph when he was restored. And what's he do?
Completely forgets about him. And then we see in chapter 41, the beginning, very, very first one, it says, 2 years later passed. 2 years after he set this guy free, basically, and told him this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden, then he remembers. 2 years!
That's frustrating.
Now, we've been in quarantine for like 2 months. Joseph, again, was still in prison. We don't know how long before. But he's in prison still for 2 more years.
Yeah. I'm frustrated at this point if I'm Joseph.
Oh, yeah.
But remember what we said. You got to segment our circumstances from God's favor. When you have the favor of God on you, circumstances not going to stand up against the favor of God. Because what happens? Pharaoh now has a dream. And the cupbearer is like, oh yeah.
Hey, I remember this guy.
Oh yeah. And none of the diviners can figure out what's going on with Pharaoh's dream. He's irritated about that. And this cupbearer speaks up and says, hey, I remember when you threw me back in prison? And he says, this guy Joseph. So Joseph comes out. Pharaoh tells his dreams to Joseph. There are 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows, and the lean cows eat the 7 fat ones. There are 7 plump ears of corn and 7 lean ears of corn. And the lean ears eat the fat ears of corn. So it's a double story, basically having the same meaning. And Joseph says, hey, the dream is all one and the same. Basically, we're going to have 7 good years. Then we're going to have 7 years of famine. So a 14-year period here. This is a significant dream that God gave Pharaoh to bless Joseph.
Yeah.
You know, I don't get the idea that Pharaoh was in God's favor. This is actually Joseph's favor.
And it goes back to the promise to before to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then it's all coming down the storylines that we've been talking about.
The blessing. Yeah, remember the blessing and the favor from last week we talked about? It's not just to be withheld for ourselves, but we're to bless others. And you're exactly right. He's using Pharaoh as a tool here, just an object to be able to get his plan enacted here. And so Pharaoh tells Joseph, he says, well, what would you do? And Joseph says, hey, why don't you choose a wise individual and put him in charge of gathering grain during these 7 years, a fifth of the grain, 20% of everything that's gathered in these next 7 years, and then you'll have reserves and you'll be able to survive the lean years. Well, Pharaoh has a aha moment. Who should we pick to handle this job of gathering?
Let me check my brain hole. Joseph, there we go.
So Joseph rises to power, other than Pharaoh, the most powerful man in Egypt. From the dungeon,
from the prison to the second most.
That's
talk about it. That's just like, it's not just like a rise in power. That's like boom, shot up into power.
Yeah, you're Joseph right now. You're like, ooh, I was in prison, but now I'm not. Now I'm in Pharaoh's house, right? So he's dancing a jig. I don't know what he was doing back then. I don't know. Maybe he was doing walk like an Egyptian. I don't know. But anyway, so Joseph is now second in command, and we got issues from earlier on. Because during this time of 7 good years, he gathers all the grain, he does this, God's given him wisdom to enact this plan. And now we come into the lean years, and who shows up in Egypt?
Well, it's not just who shows up. The word spread across the world, known world at the time, Egypt has grain.
Yeah.
And so when they're back in Canaan or wherever they're still wandering around, Jacob, we'll go back to Jacob, Joseph's father, they hear Egypt has grain, so let's send you guys go down and buy it for us. And then so he said, who ends up there but 10 brothers of Joseph.
This is what you call poetic justice.
Oh yes, the irony.
Yeah, oh the irony.
Oh the irony.
These brothers that wanted to kill Joseph, mind you, they didn't, but they wanted to. That was their first thought. Not throw him in a pit and sell him to slavery. That was plan B. Plan A was let's kill him. Reuben spoke up. He was the only one. Judah comes up with the idea after they throw him in the pit, hey, let's sell him. Let's make some money off of this deal. And so they kill the animal, make the blood on the coat of many colors, and the rest is history. Jacob thinks he's dead. So all this has happened. Now these brothers show up. And what's Joseph do? What would you do? He tests them. We talked about tests last week, and I don't think this is unmerited. They really did him wrong. So he tests them. I don't know that this was done out of I'm going to get you back kind of deal, but he does test them. I think he's trying to weigh their hearts and see where they're at, and so he tests them, and
because remember this is at least 7.5, at least 9 years, because the 7 years are good, and 2 years of prison, so a minimum of 9 years after the fact.
Yeah, probably longer. 10, 15 year, we don't know. But you're right, it's at least in that 9-10 year range.
There's a lot of stuff that can build during that time period, so that's something I think is important for us, with not necessarily how we respond to things later in life where we hold on to them.
Yep.
Because you can have the chance to hold resentment, or you can just test and see how things are going, and I think that's a thing that we can learn from Joseph here as well.
Yeah. So he shoots them all these questions. Where are you from? Who's your daddy? What's your family like? All these questions about their personal questions. They get thrown in jail for 3 days. I'm thinking of the pit. A little bit of retribution there, maybe. I don't know. But and then he has their money restored that they brought for the grain. He has their grain sacks filled. Gives them provisions for the journey back to Canaan. But until Benjamin comes. Now keep in mind, this is Joseph and Benjamin are full blood brothers. The other 10 are from Leah and the half brothers, same father but different mothers. So and Benjamin's really close to Joseph's heart, so he wants to see him again. So he says, "Hey, I'm fact checking your story. I want to see your younger brother." So he keeps Simeon in jail. He binds them in front of the other 9 brothers, sends them on their way with grain, money, and provisions for the journey. They go back. Jacob says, "No way, I'm not sending Benjamin. I lost Joseph already. We're not doing this." Time passes. They're out of grain.
Again.
No food. This famine, still during this 7 years. They're out of food. The brothers come to Jacob. They say, "Hey, Dad, we've got to get more grain." And Jacob's having none of it. He's like, no, I'm not sending my brother Benjamin. And who speaks up? I got to see there's a little bit of guilt here. Judah. The guy that suggested they sell him in the first place, all these years later, he speaks up and says, "Listen, it'll be on my head. We'll take it. It'll be on me. If anything happens to Benjamin, it's on me." So he's taking a little bit of ownership here. And so Jacob gives in. They go back. They meet with Joseph. And here we have a situation where they're eating dinner with Joseph. And he puts them in age order. Oldest to youngest. All the way from Reuben down to Benjamin.
They still don't know who he is. They don't recognize him. And so they're confused that he still knows them quite well, but yet the fact that it confuses them, because like, how does he know who's the oldest and who's the youngest here?
Yep. And so he gives Benjamin 5 times the portion of the other brothers, and Simeon's here reunited. He's out of jail evidently at this dinner, and then he continues this test. He gives them grain, money, but he adds this time the silver cup from the dinner in Benjamin's grain sack. And what happens is they go on their way. Joseph's cronies catch up with them. They accuse Benjamin. And, all this is going on. And this is just a worst case scenario for the brothers, because Dad already did not want Benjamin coming to Egypt. And here all this has happened. And now, who gets the silver cup in their pack?
Benjamin.
Worst case scenario here. So then at this point, Joseph finally reveals himself. And
Actually, I like how the story says when he brings him back in, that he actually goes off to the side for a minute and basically cries.
Oh, yeah, weeps.
Because he's like, okay, I've played this long enough, and then brings back in and reveals himself and shows him, hey, it's me. What you meant, as it says here, what you meant for good or for bad, God did it for good. He sent me here. He preserved my life. It wasn't you that sent me to Egypt. It wasn't you who sold me. It was God preparing this for you for later on. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's so important for us in 2020 or any year, any time that we experience, is that we have to understand God is working things out for our good, and He's working out His plan. There's an old song from the choir. This is probably 20, 30 years. Jim and Carol Cimbala, a Tabernacle choir, singing, God is working. He's still working. He's working all the time. And the thing is, in every little detail of your and my life, even though we may seem like we get up, we brush our teeth, we get dressed, these are insignificant things that happen in our lives. But God is using every little detail, even like in Joseph's story here. And Joseph recognizes this. There's some spiritual things going on. I think Joseph at this point it doesn't say that he was ever bitter towards God. He had favor in Potiphar's house, favor in prison. He gets second in command of Egypt, and through all this, apparently he still kept a relationship with God, because he says to his brothers, like you just repeated, God sent me to preserve life. I know that I was sent here, Esther, for such a time as this, to provide for this 7 years of famine. God's using from this. So he recognizes God's hand on his life. He says, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And I think that's incredibly mature of him. He's an adult at this point. He's not 17. We know he's at least 27 or older, somewhere in that range, maybe even in his 30s or 40s, who knows. But he has come to terms with this, and he recognizes God's hand in all this that has happened. So he provides for his brothers and his families and their families. They go back. They bring Jacob to Egypt. Jacob is reunited with his lost son. What a day that was.
I imagine.
He thought this guy was dead, killed by an animal. Hadn't seen him in, from the timeline, we think it's at least 10 years, probably longer. That's a long time to be estranged from a child who you thought was dead. And anyway, so the family comes, and but in this process, I want us to go back to what we talked about in a previous week. God gives Jacob a vision, and in the middle of the night, and Jacob has this dream vision, and he says to Jacob, 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 and Jacob responds,
"Here I am."
Where do you hear that from?
Oh, his daddy? His grandpa?
Yeah, his grandpa, Abraham. Remember when Abraham was called into the promised land, he said, Abraham, Abraham, and we talked about Abraham's availability to say, here I am, use me, whatever you want with me. And Jacob here, grandson, same response. So they settle in Goshen, which is a province of Egypt, and the famine is continuing here. And so Joseph receives all the money in the land of Egypt, and apparently regions outside of Egypt as well, because Canaan, they came here from Canaan. But he gets all the money of the people, and at that point, the people are out of money, and there's still a famine. So then they start giving him the livestock, and he's building Egypt's storehouses of money, livestock, and then eventually he gets all the land in Egypt. Now this is an amazing story, and he continues this 1/5 or this 20% principle of, in Egypt, everything that the people own, money, livestock, land, is 20% is given to Pharaoh as a result of this. So I'm sure the Pharaoh was not disappointed about that.
Probably not. He wasn't hurting.
So Jacob, then at this point, Jacob, Joseph's father, is coming to the end of his life, and Joseph has two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And Ephraim is the youngest, and Manasseh is the oldest. This goes back to Jacob and Esau. Esau was the firstborn. Jacob was the secondborn. They were twins, but Esau came first. Jacob steals the birthright through this whole deception process. And we see here Jacob goes to bless the sons, and the right hand is the hand of blessing. And so Manasseh, Joseph's oldest, is brought up on Jacob's right so that he can bless him. And Ephraim's over here. But Jacob does a switch up on him. And he does this deal right here. And Jacob actually Joseph, get my J's mixed up. Joseph speaks up and says to his dad, hey, Dad, you're not doing it right. Manasseh's deal. And Jacob corrects him. He says, listen, Manasseh is going to be blessed, but my blessing is going to the younger son, just like it happened with Esau and Jacob, with him himself and his own brother. So just another story there that just God has a great sense of creativity, and you never know what he's going to do. I think that's what's exciting about living for the Lord. We don't know what God's doing all the time. We have a sense, if we're staying in step with the Spirit, we should have an idea. But what prophets were predicting COVID-19? None. Not me either. I'm not claiming to be a prophet. I'm just saying, folks that think they know the future, they know what the Bible says. Well, nobody predicted this. And so who knows what God's doing? But he's working out his plan, and you can be sure that the favor and blessing that he puts in your and my life is meant for not only us to enjoy, but also to bless others. So anyway, at the end of this story here today now, Jacob dies, And then after the father dies, the brothers have a little bit of leftover concern. They're worried here. But in Genesis chapter 50, and I love this, in verse 20 it says, "As for you," Joseph speaking to his brothers, "you meant evil against me. You wanted to kill me. You threw me in a pit, sold me, and left me for dead basically. But God had other plans." And he says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." No matter what has happened in your life, again, the favor of God cannot be outweighed by human circumstances and decisions. Your boss at work has it out for you. Doesn't matter. If God's favor is on you, then whatever your boss wants to do, he can do whatever he wants. What's he going to do? Fight against God? You have a relationship in your family or something that's just, you're butting heads against that thing. If you have the favor of God on you, there is nothing that individual can do to usurp the favor of God. We've got to recognize this in our life. This is God's sovereignty. This is His almighty power on display. And what do we call that? Omnipotence. I was searching for the word. Omnipotence means all-powerful. And so we need to recognize that in our lives. So Joseph dies at 110 years. He was 17 when he got sold into slavery, 110 when he dies. So anywhere from 75 to 90 years, he rules in Egypt as second in command. Man, that's awesome.
From a pit to ruling Egypt for 75 years.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's awesome. So I know you've been reading in Exodus this week, and we're going to be covering the life of Moses next week. So keep reading in Exodus now that we're finished with all 50 chapters of Genesis. On Wednesday nights, we're going to continue talking in our Bible studies then about Psalms and Proverbs. So be faithful in your reading. If you get behind, I've gotten behind during this time. I don't know if you have at all, but there's days I've missed and just been getting behind, and that's my fault. But just catch up, get back on it, and either pick back up or try to catch up, whatever. But keep with us in reading through the Bible this year. You're going to be blessed. You're going to find the favor of God on you despite your circumstances. And so I want to see you back here tonight. We're going to be doing worship and prayer tonight. Mention Bible study on Wednesday. Go through our weekly schedule just one more time. It's on our Facebook and website. But
so tomorrow we'll have a question of the week. Just like, share, comment on it. Just kind of share things. It lets us grow together, build community. Even though we can't be together physically with the physical distancing, we can still grow together socially. It's just nice to learn things about other people. Tuesdays having our prayer request day. Send your prayers to us, requests. It does say to make your requests known before God. So let us know. We will share and pray with and for you. That's important. Wednesdays meeting Bible study. Thursdays the small group Zoom calls. And Fridays the fasting and food distribution.
Yes, and in regards to the Zoom calls, this week again, we'll have a post on Facebook on the private page where you can sign up for 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6:15, or 7:30. Thank you for doing that, and that's been a valuable time. Look forward to that again this Thursday. And the last thing we want to talk about today is possibly returning to church.
Yes.
In a physical sense. So we don't have any direct date to tell you right now, but that's coming soon. And as we get information made available to us and we make a decision, you will be notified quickly of that. So don't make assumptions based off of what the governor has decided, that this is what we're going to do, this is what other churches are doing, we're assuming we're going to do the same thing. Please don't do that. We're going to weigh everything and get the information that we need to and make a wise decision. And we will absolutely be clear with you as far as what our return plans and how that's going to happen, what it's going to look like. It's going to be different than 2 months ago. So be patient with that. And but we look forward to keeping ministry active, whether it's online or when we get to do it in person. That'll be fun as well. So keep serving God, live in the favor and blessing of God, pour it out on others, and we will see you back here tonight for worship and prayer.
See you then.
Love you.